In Iraq, the deadliest weapon wasn't always a bomb. It was a phone call. While U.S. troops searched streets and questioned suspects, the enemy was coordinating in plain sight. Of his cell phones, no one was really tracking. Attacks seemed random. Explosions came without warning, until one Army captain stopped asking where the enemy was and started asking who was calling whom. This is the true story of Captain Travis Patriquin and how listening to the war changed everything. In Iraq, the war did not announce itself. There were no warning sirens before a roadside bomb, no visible enemy massing on the horizon. Attacks came suddenly, then vanished into the streets, leaving behind questions no patrol report could answer. By 2004, the most dangerous weapon in Iraq was an TA Riflelet, was an improvised explosive device buried beneath the road. The people who planted them moved quietly, blended in, and communicated in ways U.S. forces weren't fully tracking. Captain Travis Patriquin noticed something others overlooked. Every single raid turned up cell phones, cheap devices, prepaid SIM cards, call logs filled with unfamiliar numbers. They were bagged, tagged, and stored away like evidence from a crime scene. But Patriquin didn't see clutter. He saw a map. Instead of asking who owned each phone, he asked who talked to whom and. When he began collecting call histories, contact lists, and timestamps from phones recovered during operations, using basic software and spreadsheets, he started laying the information out visually, linking one number to another, one call to the next. Slowly, patterns began to form. Certain phones would light up with activity right before bombings. Others reappeared again and again near attack sites. Couriers followed consistent routes. Entire networks emerge, quiet, efficient, and deadly. This wasn't how intelligence was usually done. At the time, insurgent tracking relied heavily on informants, patrol reports, and interrogations. Digital communication analysis at the tactical level was still uncommon. There was no handbook for what Patriquin was building, so he built it anyway. Night after night, he refined his system. He expanded the maps. He connected names to numbers, numbers to locations, and locations to attacks. What had once looked random now showed structure. The enemy wasn't invisible. They were connected. With this new information, U.S. and Iraqi units began to act differently. Raids became far more precise. Patrols shifted away from guesswork and toward probability. Bomb networks were disrupted before devices were ever planted. Attacks that might have happened simply never did. The change was noticeable. Units using Patriquin's intelligence saw fewer successful IED strikes. Operations became quieter, faster, and more targeted. Instead of chasing insurgents after an explosion, forces began intercepting them beforehand. Not everyone accepted this approach immediately. It challenged existing methods. It relied on analysis instead of pure instinct. But the results spoke for themselves, and the techniques began to spread beyond his unit. What Patriquin was doing would later become standard practice. But at the time, it was brand new. In 2006, Patriquin was serving in Ramadi, one of the most dangerous cities in Iraq, advising Iraqi forces during intense fighting. The same threat he had worked so hard to expose still lingered beneath the roads. On December 6, 2006, Captain Travis Patriquin was killed by a roadside bomb. He was 32 years old. After his death, senior commanders openly acknowledged the profound impact of his work. They credited him with fundamentally changing how U.S. forces understood insurgent networks and how they fought an enemy that relied on speed, secrecy, and communication. Patriquin didn't invent new technology. He just listened to what was already there. Today, tracking digital networks is standard in modern warfare. But before the doctrine, before the systems, before the software, there was one officer with a spreadsheet and a question no one else was asking. What if the war was already telling us where the enemy would be next? Captain Travis Patriquin proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't for its understanding. Thanks for watching.